Hello, church. Let us pray. God be with you. Timeless and eternal God, through whom we find our being, purpose, and redemption, bless us in our work for your church. Remind us that our striving is in vain without you as our guide. Today, as we find nourishment from your earth, dependent on the hands that prepared it, we remember our joint work with the General Convention of the Episcopal Church. And so bless this food to our use, accept the offering of our efforts for your church, and keep us ever mindful of those less fortunate. We ask all this in the name of Jesus the Christ, empowered and enlivened by the Spirit, our mediator and advocate. Amen. Now it is my pleasure to introduce my boss, Mary Kay Wool, the CEO and president of the Church Pension Group.
Thank you, Clayton. A couple of things. First, if any of you meet Jermaine, and you probably seen him and heard him on our various webinars, he is not at all shy. So do feel free to say hello to him at the back of the room as you leave. And thank you, Jermaine, for your emceeing of this. Secondly, let me say a word about Clayton Crawley. Many of you know our beloved Clayton Crawley, who has been at CPG for over 25 years, many years overseeing our IT group, and in the most recent several years has been head of church relations. And Clayton is retiring at the end of this year, which I'm really sad to say. We're going to miss him dearly. But I just know that everyone here, most people who know him and other people who benefit from his work and helping us be out and about around the church, appreciate his efforts. So I'd just like a round of applause, please, for Clayton. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. This event today is focusing on the many ways that CPG collaborates with the church. And we thought that this was a good topic for today, given that this General Convention marks the 15th anniversary of two very significant initiatives, really, I'd say kind of big bang type initiatives for the Episcopal Church and CPG. And that is the establishment of the denominational health plan and the lay pension system. But we're going to take the occasion today not only to talk about those, but also in general to talk about the wide-ranging ways that CPG and the General Convention collaborate and get really important work done for the church. So before I get into the substance, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. First, we're delighted to be joined by Catherine McCormick. Catherine has been the chair of the CPG board this past triennium. She hails from Mississippi, and she was the canon for administration and finance for the Diocese of Mississippi. I'm sure she's well known to many of you. She has served as an officer of several interim bodies, as a member of the Church Pension Fund legislative committee for 5 different general conventions. She's been a Credo faculty member and also served as the president of Province 4. And we've just enjoyed her participation and benefited from her participation as a board member of the Church Pension Fund for the past 12 years and as the chair of our board for the past 3. She's retiring from the board, but I know that she is hardly retiring from active service in the church. Second, I'd like to introduce Frank Armstrong. Frank is our Chief Operating Officer, which means he oversees our 3 lines of business. He oversees our vast benefits business for clergy and lay employees. He oversees our property and casualty business and our church publishing business. Before CPG, Frank was a consultant with Hewitt Associates. He worked as a consultant with CPG for a number of years and then joined us full-time in 2011 and has served as our Chief Operating Officer for several years. And then I'd like to introduce Patty Favreau. Patty is our Chief Communications Officer, but that does not fully describe her range of responsibilities. She also oversees our research team and efforts. She oversees communications, engagement, logistics, having responsibility for this wonderful event that we're having today. So a broad range of responsibilities. Before joining us, notwithstanding having been trained as a lawyer, Patty was president of a brand strategy firm and chief marketing officer for New York Life's domestic life insurance and annuity business. So I welcome all three of our panelists today. Thank you for participating. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about a wide range of ways that CPG and General Convention collaborate. And I want to start with Catherine because Catherine was very involved on the committee that considered the DHP, the Denominational Health Plan, DHP for short, and LPS, lay pension system, back in 2009 when these two major initiatives were launched. And there was a lot of pre-work and consideration and study that went into that. And then an enormous decision by the church to actually commit to providing mandatory pensions for lay employees and to commit to the church all coming together and engaging in one single effort to provide medical care across clergy and lay employee populations. So Catherine, I just love a historical perspective from you to talk about what were those days like? What sort of things did you consider? Tell us a bit about the debate and just give us your perspective from having been active on the ground at that time.
Thank you, Mary Kate. As Mary Kate mentioned, I was active at that time on the legislative committee. In fact, I served as the deputy chair. So I was very familiar with these resolutions. I was a lay employee of the church and so had a personal interest in these two resolutions passing, but also looked at the increasing number of lay employees, particularly in management in diocesan offices and in parishes across the church. Lay parity is nothing new to the church. In fact, discussions went back as early as 1976 when a feasibility study was asked for. But it wasn't until 1991 that a resolution was actually passed saying that lay employees shall or can have a pension. This was only a resolution. It did set the funding rate at between 5% and 9%, and lay employees could have either a defined contribution or defined benefit plan. In 2009, it was significant that the lay pension system went into the canons, and it made it mandatory for lay employees to have a pension and a single provider. And then for the denominational health plan, with the rising cost of medical care in 2006, a feasibility study was called for by General Convention, and the pension fund embarked on a very detailed exploration of a denominational health plan, not one cost, but one plan. And it was after this passed, we then went to work educating educating the church on this. So as you see, both of these topics have been long in the system, but it was only in 2009 that they became part of who we are.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we'll come back to the denominational health plan and the lay pension system. But before we do that, I mentioned that Patty oversees both communications and our research group and efforts. And one of the ways that we are very involved, as you all know, with General Convention is engaging in a number of studies that we are requested to conduct on a broad range of topics. And Patty is in the hot seat when it comes to those requests. So Patty, just there's so many interesting ones and ones that have really had a significant impact on the church and the church's care for its people. Could you talk about some of those that you consider most significant, please?
Absolutely. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Dr. Matthew Price, who's actually seated here in the front row. And if you've ever gone to a presentation of our statistics and insights, it was likely led ably by him. So he may come up and give me the hook at any time if I say anything that is incorrect or inappropriate. The Church Pension Group has access to a lot of different data because we serve as the benefits administrator for the church. On occasion, however, and because of General Convention's confidence placed in us, we're asked to do other types of studies. Notably, we're elected at every General Convention, have been since 1943, to serve as the recorder of ordinations. What that means is that we have insights into ordination trends, termination trends, retirement trends. We can do detailed studies by order of clergy. At times, too, the General Convention asks us to study specific things like parity, not only between clergy and lay, but compensation parity between men and women, between different racial groups, between different ethnic groups. More recently, General Convention asked us to embark on a survey to really collect demographic data among clergy to understand the full picture of the church, to understand the diversity of the church. There was a misconception that we already had this information, but because we didn't need it to administer our pension business, we didn't collect it. So we have done a really extraordinary, I think, outreach campaign aided by Stephanie Spellers and the presiding bishop. And we have a lot of rich information about clergy demographics that allows us to know if there's any disparity, and spoiler alert, there is, between compensation, between deployment patterns, between career paths. I don't have time to go into those details now. I commend Matthew's reports that appear on our website, or you can corner Matthew or me to give you some of those details. But I will also let you know that our data is only as good as your input is if you are a member of the clergy. We have 30%, 40% participation, but on each table, there's a card with a QR code. And I really would encourage those of you, everyone who is a clergy person in the church, if you haven't completed the survey, please do, because it allows us to offer insight into what is happening as it relates to parity and equity around the church. We are also asked to study things of interest to CPG and the broader community. We were recently asked to do a forensic audit of the origin and sources of funds. Many institutions in the church were asked to do that. I haven't read or had the opportunity to see other people's reports. Ours was published a while ago, and we looked at our top original funders and told the truth about their engagement in the enslavement of humans here in the United States back in our dark past. So at the urging of General Convention, with the election of General Convention, and just simply in fellowship with General Convention, we've done some really smart work to help the church understand itself, and really smart work to help CPG better understand how we can better serve clergy and lay people in the church.
Thank you, Patty. So I said that we come back to the lay pension system and the denominational health plan. I'm going to start with the lay pension system. And just thinking back to the days of Bishop Lawrence, 1917, when the clergy pension plan was launched, that was the fruit of Bishop Lawrence's audacious dream that there would be a mandatory pension plan for clergy. So clergy didn't have to go and individually negotiate with their parishes to get some sort of retirement benefit. And as Catherine noted, it took many, many years, decades for that to become true for lay employees. Even though there was a resolution in 1991, it was simply a resolution saying that lay employees should have benefits. And it wasn't until 2009 that that was made canonical and actually mandated. So as I said, that was kind of a big bang, that along with the DHP in one single general convention. And Frank's group, heading up our many businesses, was responsible for actually implementing the lay pension system. So Frank, tell us what that work entailed when we kind of hit the ground running in 2009 to put something in place.
Thanks, Mary Kate. I guess before I get into this, I have to confess I'm microphone challenged. I talk with my hands, so I'm going to try to make sure that I'm still talking into the microphone. So I'll be switching back and forth a little bit. But with the lay pension system, I guess the first thing I'll say is it's proven that the General Convention 2009 made a wise decision with the lay pension system back in 2009. And we're happy to report that the results are very positive. So just some high level participation more than doubled. So we had around 5,000 lay employees participating in the lay pension system coming in 2009. That is more than doubled to over 11,000 now. And the assets in the lay defined contribution plan have recently surpassed $1 billion. So that's a great milestone. And just some context is around 200 million back in 2009. So really good. As Patty said, we do a lot of work to ask lay employees, well, how do you feel about the plans? And that's also been positive. They feel a little bit more than 50% feel they feel generally confident or very confident in their ability to retire, readiness for retirement. And then they feel good about the competitiveness of the plan as compared to others that they know, the outside of the church. So that's the yes to this is successful. The yes, there's more work to do as well, both in terms of there's 50% that don't feel as confident as we would like them to be. And so we spend time on education and bringing financial resources to bear and to remind employers and employees that the 9%, because we also hear 9% in 18, that's continued concern on lay clergy, that the 9% is a minimum. And some employers already do more than 90%, those that can. So we just educate in terms of what is already available and then what other financial resources we can bring to bear to help lay employees better prepare for retirement.
So you've used the word educate a few times. So Patty, that goes back to you because you oversee our efforts to get out there and really educate people on retirement readiness. So how have we been doing that in conjunction with the lay pension system and engaging with our lay employees?
So there's many ways. We do ongoing outreach to everyone, lay employees and clergy, to remind people not only that they should be saving for retirement, but also how to save for retirement. We have an amazing partner in Fidelity Investments. We make educational opportunities available to people. We write letters. Some of you might say too frequently. I would say not frequently enough, because until we get, even though our lay employees are saving at a rate of 13%, which is better than most people in the US population, but not quite at the 15% that is recommended by Fidelity, we are constantly reminding people to save for retirement. Also because we have some demographic data, more for clergy than we do for lay, we understand gaps in savings for retirement. And so we're coming up with affinity-based targeted programming to help people, to help understand what some of the barriers are to saving and to make sure we deliver against those barriers. We also check on the financial literacy of clergy and lay employees to really understand where the gaps are, what it is you need to know. And then we design educational programming that we deliver online, that we deliver face-to-face, to make sure that all your questions are being answered and that you understand the critical role that planning for the future plays, the work you need to do today to be ready for your future. And the work continues. We are here all week. If you have any ideas on what we could be doing better, more or less of in terms of providing education and information to lay employees and clergy, please stop by our booth or talk to any one of us, because we are always open to new ideas. The goal is not only to offer these products and services. The goal is to make sure everybody is aware of all of the products and services so they can take advantage of them and plan for the future.
Thank you. And you mentioned parity, Frank. I want to put a little sharper point on that because I frequently get the question, what are you doing to make sure that lay employees have parity with clergy? And it's a little bit out of our hands. So Frank, can you talk a little bit more about that? What is the possibility of actually achieving parity and benefits between lay and clergy, especially when it comes to the lay pension system?
Well, as I mentioned before, it starts with us focused on education. As Patty said, that some have received the lay pension system 9% as that's sort of a maximum. So part of it is just making sure that the understanding is there's already opportunities to do more if an employer is able to do that. So we spend
And,
time.
and some do, am I
Yes.
correct? Yes.
Yes, so some do that are able to do and fully understand that not everybody might be able to do that, but that opportunity is already there. And, and we also educate employees in terms of, what they can do to contribute to those funds. So I said there's more work to do that. We have put a report together that it's D045 from 2018 and then A237 from the same year that kind of gets into further details around the differences, because these are very complex plans, but we have defined contribution plans and defined benefit plans, and we sort of laid out sort of specifics of how those plans work, how they compare lay versus clergy, and what opportunities the church has to consider if there are more decisions that want to be made around closing that gap of 9 to 18. So again, we continue to just make sure people are aware of that. If you haven't read them, take the time to read those reports. It gives some good education, but it also provides some things to consider.
I'm glad you mentioned the two reports, because there was a lot of effort and expense that went into producing two really comprehensive, thoughtful reports on lay benefits and parity and such. So if you're at all interested in the topic, please go back and read them, because they are quite comprehensive, quite detailed, and still, I mean, there might be a few updated numbers, but still quite relevant in their content. Although they were pursuant to resolutions in 2018, they weren't actually published until 2021. So they're fairly current, and I commend them to your reading. Great. Well, I think it's time to go on to the denominational health plan, always a topic of interest at General Convention. And again, part of that big bang in 2009, perhaps even more momentous in terms of scope of work in launching the denominational health plan. Frank, can you talk a little bit about what that work entailed back in 2009 and ensuing years, and where we stand?
Thanks, Mary Kate, again. So I'm coming on 35 years in, I would say, my career in the employee benefits arena. From consultant, I'm an actuary by trade. So we have a lawyer and actuary. Doesn't get much sexier than that, And so I always remind myself the days can be long, but the years go by quickly. And that's when I think about the denominational health plan. I was in a unique opportunity to have the experience with CPG and the Episcopal Church as I was consultant. So in the mid to late 90s. Even more importantly, Church Pension Group has been working with the Episcopal Church for decades before that and trying to figure out healthcare and what it means. Catherine talked a little bit about, so how did that lead us into 2009? I would just say, to add to that, is healthcare industry is complex. The landscape's ever changing. We expect this to be a continued discussion, not only at General Convention, but as we go through the years, because things are going to continue to change. And if you remember, back in the late 90s to 2000s, this was in the era of managed care sort of unwinding. And I won't go into the details of that, but managed care had, some years were successful, but it then turned into things unwinding, and the church, like other large employers, figuring out, what do we do with this? We're looking at double-digit premium increases. We have some dioceses purchased plans through the medical trust, through Church Pension Group. Others went on their own. Others were a mix of that. So the church had this mixed bag of how it was delivering healthcare to clergy and lay employees. And that brought the feasibility study to bear, as Catherine said, that we were well suited to do that study. And long and short, it said the times lended themselves to take advantage of economies of scale, pull the risk pool together, remove unnecessary costs, which General Convention in 2009 said, yes, makes sense, go forward. And we were ready to implement and continue to minister it.
So again, engagement, communication, there was a lot behind the scenes that Frank and team had to do in terms of systems and processes and people hitting the ground running. But speaking of hitting the ground running, Patty, you were out there getting people engaged, communicating, because it's one thing to provide it. And as you mentioned earlier, how do people take advantage of what's available to them? Do you want to just say a few words about what your work in that area was?
Yeah, so I joined the Church Pension Group in 2008, the day the stock market crashed. My first meeting actually was at the Church Pension Fund Board of Trustees. And as Mary Kate mentioned, I came from the for-profit sector. Thank you. And so I was gobsmacked to walk into this conversation about how could we be using our resources, both human and otherwise, to expand benefits to more populations around the church. And I was further inspired by all of the energy that I felt around the church for how can we improve benefits? How can we deliver great care to lay employees in addition to clergy? So I went to my first general convention. This resolution passed. It seemed like a wonderful, generous, great social justice idea. And, you know, fist pump in the air, we were happy. And then day two, we were like, how are we going to administer this thing? So we set out to develop systems to track eligibility. Lori Casalonis, who I believe is in the room, in the back, she leads a team of just warriors who went around to every diocese to explain what the denominational health plan was. Because, you know, Frank's an actuary, which means he's really boring and he understands all of this stuff at a level of depth that most of us never will. But Lori's team went around and made sure the diocese understood what the denominational health plan was all about and what it was inviting people to do in terms of having cost parity between clergy and lay and how they could think about making that possible and learning from one diocese and then putting them in networks with other dioceses to make sure that the entire church could seize this opportunity to really deliver comprehensive health benefits. Same was true for the lay pension system, but it was a lot of traveling around the church. It was a lot of constantly writing things to the church. It was a lot of conversations, a lot of trust building. When we started all these studies, we had to hire third-party researchers because we were concerned lay employees didn't know who we are. And now when we survey lay employees, they rate us as well and as highly as clergy do. So there's been a lot of ground cover, a lot of education, support, communication. We are not all the way there yet, but with the help and support of all of you and with the hard work of Lori and others on our team, we've come a very, very long way.
Well, I said that, thank you, Patty. I said that the DHP has always been a hot button. I've not been to a single general convention where there have not been resolutions about the denominational health plan. So as we all know, healthcare is exceedingly expensive no matter what you do and increasingly so. And at the last general convention, we were asked to participate in a task force that was set up to study the DHP to see, is there any way we can continue to squeeze cost out, or is there a better option than the DHP? We were really thrilled that that resolution was passed, because oftentimes at general convention, you get people popping up with a lot of, you know, valid but anecdotal evidence. And this is such a complex area that a study was really called for, and, you know, really time to bring experts to the table to reflect and think hard about, are there still better ways to do things? Can we continue to refine this so it better serves the church? I was also thrilled that both Catherine and Frank were invited to participate on that task force, which completed its work a few months ago and have made the report. In fact, I think a report is being made perhaps today to the House of Deputies. And I'd like to invite Catherine and Frank to talk a little bit about the work of that task force and some of the findings. So let me turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. And as Mary Kate mentioned, the Church Pension Fund really welcomed this resolution because it gave us an opportunity to see maybe if there were some areas that we could focus on. It was a very diverse group, and I represented the trustees. As I mentioned, I was deputy chair in 2009, so DHP kind of had begun being in my DNA, and so I guess that's why I served on this committee. But it was, as I mentioned, a very diverse group. It was a daunting task, and I think for the first half of our first meeting, it was, how are we going to tackle this? And we really struggled. And so we wanted to make some report to General Convention this year, but we realized there was just so much work to do. So we did hire an outside group to look at it. And very significantly, this consultant was funded by both the Episcopal Church and the pension fund. And so it was definitely a collaborative effort to look at the denominational health plan. And I will let Frank tell you what they found.
It's just first an editorial note. I like to call myself a recovering actuary. So, but yeah, so that's where we were in the task force in the early days. We collectively agreed that it'd be good to get a third party who really never did any work with the fund or the Episcopal Church. Just say, take a fresh look and see what we come back with. And I would say at the highest level, it was good to see they affirmed that the denominational health plan again was the right decision that the General Convention made in 2009. And that although not perfect and healthcare affordability is still an issue, it's the most cost-effective and efficient way for the Episcopal Church to deliver healthcare, at least domestically, to clergy and lay employees. So it sort of affirmed that and said without the mandatory, it would splinter back into pre-2009 days. And that was something that I didn't think would be helpful. But then what else can we do? And that got into the more difficult conversations because we pull levers every year where we can to keep costs below industry average. And we've been successful in that. But I always say competitiveness is different than affordability. And that's what is the bigger challenge, is how do we tackle affordability without watering down the value? As Patty said, we try to optimize the value of everything we put out there. And the task force recognized that means there's going to be some tougher trade-off decisions that we're going to have to put in front of General Convention to kind of wrestle with and tackle and sort of say, where do we go with this if we want to, put a further dent into that affordability?
Thank you. Wonderful. So, and I think, Frank, I'm just going to kind of toot your horn a bit on this. I think that consultant came back and said, basically, CPG, you've turned over virtually every stone you can to squeeze cost savings out. And there were a few things on kind of whether we should actually offer some of the top tier plans that some of the dioceses have been demanding, but question as to whether that's appropriate. And then also there was a resolution in 2012 suggesting that we try to bring everybody towards an average. And they questioned the reasonableness of that approach and actually recommended perhaps that we rethink that. So all in all, there was a lot of affirming in that, but also some good fodder for additional thought and with some resolutions that will be considered. So excellent work by that committee. And as I said, we were really grateful that a task force was funded and that people were willing to come together and have some very tedious, difficult, detailed conversations to help us think through how we can continue to drive down the cost. Healthcare is always going to be expensive. How can we make it as affordable as possible? So it was wonderful work, and we were thrilled to participate in that. And now I'm going to completely shift topics again. And one of the many ways, we've just talked about the ways we're connected at CPG to General Convention through a lot of work that we share and are delighted to share. But going way back 100 years ago, one of the other ways we were connected is that when CPG was founded, it was determined that General Convention would elect 24 out of our 25 trustees. I'm the 25th trustee, the CEO of the Church Pension Fund, so actually indirectly elected by General Convention because the trustees elect me. So every General Convention, there's 12 seats are up for re-election. It's kind of a straddle thing. So there's 6 of those trustees who are incumbents, and then there's 6 where we have retiring trustees who have served their full 2 terms. I should say there's 6-year terms, and with the possibility of being reelected once. So a total of potentially 12 years. This time around, we have 4 incumbents who are running for the board. 2 incumbents have decided not to run. And those incumbents who are running are the Very Reverend Sam Candler, Yvonne O'Neill, the Right Reverend, newly Right Reverend Austin Rios, and the Honorable Linda Watt. And Catherine, I'd like you as the board chair to talk a little bit about how we think of the needs we have in terms of skill sets for trustees, and a little bit about your thoughts on this upcoming election, which will be in a couple of days.
Thank you, Mary Kate. We will elect trustees this year, as Mary Kate and General Convention does every year. It's real important for General Convention to look at the needs of the pension fund, and the report in the Blue Book states that. And our makeup goes, it kind of ebbs and flows. Many years ago, many General Conventions ago, we were in desperate need of parish priests because we did not have many on the board. That's now we're to the point that we really need to look at some lay professionals, attorneys, pension specialists, financial and persons in finance. It's very important that we have that rounded board, because we are fiduciaries of the fund, and we need the talent there to have and to continue to have a strong board. So for the deputies in the room, I invite you and ask you to read or reread the bios in the Blue Book, and to prayerfully and thoughtfully consider the needs of the pension fund board. It's to everyone's advantage to have the best board that we can, and we need that talent to continue the good work of Church Pension Fund.
Thank you, Catherine. Do you want to say a word about incumbents?
Yes, absolutely. The incumbents, let me back up. It's a strong learning curve. We manage and oversee 3 very complex lines of business, and you really don't hit the ground day one, because it's such an educational thing to be able to find your voice. So having served 6 years and to have those trustees reelected is really vital to the continuity of the board and to the decisions that are put before us.
Thank you. And now we've covered a wide range of subjects, and I would like to invite your questions. And if we didn't cover a topic that you would have liked to have heard from us on, feel free to ask questions on those topics as well. So I'll open it up, and I think we'll have people running around with mics. So feel free to raise your hand and we'll do our best to answer your questions.
One here, Mary Kate.
Hi, I'm Christian Clough, lay deputy from the Diocese of Maine, and I've been curious for a long time to know if the Church Pension Group has ever investigated collaborating with other denominations, as we're all sort of on this, downward slide in members, if there are efficiencies with working with other denominations.
Well, that is a fabulous question. And not only have we considered that, but we've been doing that for many, many years. So we belong to a group called the Church Benefits Association. I sit on the board of that, and actually until a couple of years ago, chaired that board for several years. That's over 50 different denominations, the whole gamut of Protestant denominations, several Catholic groups, Jewish groups, the YMCA. And we come together, we have working groups with different areas of expertise. So there's CEO group, a CFO group, investors group, and such. And then we also have a sister organization of which I also sit on the board, called the Church Alliance. And that is a lobbying group. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of legislation perennially on pensions and retirement and medical and such. And oftentimes church plans are overlooked, and we have very special rules that apply to us. So that that alliance, the Church Alliance, is very, very active. We have outside lawyers we engage and lobbyists in that to make sure that we are getting, the proper legislative solutions for plans like ours. In terms of some of the things that we've done, we have, most importantly, I'd say, is we have a purchasing coalition, which we belong to for several years, on prescription drugs. So even though healthcare is expensive, we save millions of dollars a year in terms of prescription drugs for our clients by virtue of availing ourselves of the economies of scale. So not only the tens of thousands of people we support in the Episcopal Church, but well over 200,000 lives through that coalition. And we continue to look at more and more opportunities. There are others as well, but that is a topic of conversation at every meeting. So thank you. Love to have a chance to address that. Other questions?
Thank you. I'm Christine Blaise from the Diocese of Tennessee. I am curious to learn more about the research and statistics that you all do that is really interesting and wonderful, and the desire, how that relates with the desire of the General Convention to perhaps do research into some other areas of our demographics and where we're thriving, where we're not thriving. I wonder how those come together. Who does what? And is it possible for the General Convention to ask Church Pension Group to do even more of the research for us because you're so good at it?
You are so seated at the right table.
I'm going to press it. I'm going to just make some prefatory remarks and then turn that over to Patty. But I think one of the reasons that the Church Pension Fund has been successful for over 100 years is we are very clear about what our work is and what the work of the church is. And we're given monies to support pensions for clergy, and we're very careful not to use those to do other things that do not go to their retirement benefits. But I'm going to turn it over to Patty to address that in the many ways we collaborate with DFMS in the research area.
I'll start, but definitely pigeonhole Matthew when I'm at the end of the luncheon. But we have a wonderful relationship with the church, the Episcopal Church Center, and Molly James, who has been Matthew's partner there. Molly and Matthew have been going around the church at different venues, sharing demographic information that we have about clergy with really rich financial and attendance and congregational well-being information that actually is collected by the church itself through the parochial report. And they are working on updating the parochial report to provide even richer information. We happen to receive some of that information that helps us with our lines of business, like property and casualties, right? So we need to understand the finances and the closures of different parishes around the church. We also, in our role of recorder of ordinations, we need to understand what's happening in the career lives of clergy. So that is in our lane. And then also as a benefits administrator, we need to understand what's happening in the lives of the people that we serve. So those tend to be the areas of inquiry for us. But we always collaborate either as a background research partner to help the Episcopal Church fine-tune questions, to help people understand which questions should come to us and which questions should come to the Episcopal Church. And we are always available as a listening partner. It may not be us doing the research, but we are actively engaged and interested in collecting insights because we are all here to serve the same body.
Thank you for that excellent question. Others?
Here and one here.
Daniel Cave, Diocese of the Rio Grande. There's been some discussions, at least in our diocese, regarding the great aging and graying of the clergy and how some of the options for clergy past age 72 are limited vis-a-vis the participation, further continuing participation in the pension retirement part of the compensation package for clergy past 72. There seems to be some confusion as to who controls the age at which the church's contributions to a priest's retirement, who owns that line? Is that a church thing or is that a church pension thing? If we wanted that mandatory retirement age to raise to age 75, for example,
Right.
who holds that?
Yeah, a really good question, because there's a lot of people have that question. And I think there's actually going to be some debate in the House of Bishops today on a resolution to potentially raise the retirement age of clergy from 72 to 75. It is canonical. The age 72 retirement age is canonical. That's a decision by the church. So our rules have followed that. We've said, therefore, at 72, clergy will start taking their pensions. If in fact the retirement age was raised to 75, then we would relook at that, age 72 thing and think about, does that mean that we should, raise the age of, pensions in terms of collecting pensions to 75, therefore assessments still going in, but we'd have to think through the implications of that. But the basic decision as to what the retirement age of clergy is a decision by the church.
Might not.
I guess that's the question was, as the church raise the age to retirement age to 75, is there a chance that we would not start people on their pensions, that we would not start the time that people would collect their pensions until 75? My guess is we would follow it, but there'd be some complications. So I'm going to turn to Frank to answer that in more detail, since he's so detailed and boring. No. And incidentally, Patty and I both have legal backgrounds. So some of the things about sexy and not sexy, I object to that too.
I think the short answer is that it could be yes or no. Like we're thinking about this anyway, to say, should the pension plan have any age, attached to it? Because as the federal government changes its rules around minimum distribution requirements and that sort of stuff, and those ages are moving. It was kind of easier when everything was 72, and that's not the same anymore. So we've been thinking about that anyway, to say, does it make sense to keep it 72, to remove it altogether? And as a church is thinking about 75, is there any value in just raising it to 75? I would say we wouldn't do that in a knee-jerk reaction. We want to think through all these other pieces to say, do we even need to limit it to any age is kind of where our heads are at, and no decision made yet, but we're just paying attention to what the church is doing and talking, and we're thinking about similar stuff.
Another great question. Thank you.
Hi, Patty Downing, Delaware. On the flip side of that, several years ago, it went from full retirement at 40 years of service, and then 55 plus 30. As more and more clergy are second career people, and the demographics that you see about the average age of clergy when they start, can you talk a little bit about where you're casting your vision as to what full retirement looks like, what that age would be, and anything that's coming down the pike there? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And I'll answer and then turn it again to Frank to see if he has any embellishments. But again, I think these are church questions. So even, way back when, before my time, I think before Frank or Patty's time, when we did the 35 and 50 for early retirement, that really, a policy like that really drives behavior. So if you think of compensation systems and retirement systems as incentivizing a certain type of behavior, I don't think we can lead the way on that. I think that really should entail a church discussion about what do we want the demographics of our clergy to look like in terms of age and careers and that? And if we get some guidance, then we may, we may think about tweaking the way we design the retirement system. But I don't think that that would be something we would lead, because that would be making a decision for the church as to what the clergy needs of the church are. Frank, do you have anything to add there?
Not a lot, I guess, but what we look at these things, and what we first look at is, as we're seeing some changes in the demographics and everything that you spoke about. First is, well, what would be the financial impact on the fund? So if we did change X, Y, or Z, or if deployment patterns or retirement patterns are changing, what would that mean for our ability to continue to be confident that we can pay pensions tomorrow and tomorrow's tomorrow, sort of thing? And so at the highest level, in general, somebody retires later, that's better for a pension plan, for the financial sort of thing. So we just look at, but that's not always the case, depending upon everything else and what we do about that. So we're spending some time to really listen more about what's going on. I don't think we're yet ready to say, here's our trajectory, but that's work we're going to be doing over the next 3 years that Mary Kate, you might want to talk about a little bit there.
I just want to follow up, because I think it's a both and in the previous question. What I heard you say, and that speaks to the complexity of the work that you have to do. If the federal government raises the age to 75, you're not going to automatically go to 75. So you're not going to follow them, but you're also not going to lead. So I'm
Right.
we're sort of in this catch-22 of the demographics are showing that the clergy that are going into ordained ministry, that their age group is going up. So I don't know where the tipping point for action is. And I know you probably can't pinpoint that either right now, but there seems to be a push-pull in that.
Right. Well, we did respond in celebrating our 100th anniversary. We launched a redux of the clergy pension plan. And that was effective January 1, 2018. And then we looked at the fact that clergy were being ordained later. There were a lot of second career clergy. So one of the changes, so we're not being passive. One of the changes we've made in that regard was to say that once you hit 65, even the rule before was you had to be in the plan for 5 years before you vested. We changed it to say, once you turn 65, you're vested. So somebody could be ordained at 66 and they would vest. Somebody could be ordained at 71, they would vest. So that was just one of a variety of tweaks we made. We also made it much easier for part-time and compensated bivocational clergy to participate at a meaningful level in the pension fund. So we're looking at all of these, and within the structure, making tweaks to the way we do it. I'm just saying we're not going to make major change in a way that would kind of significantly influence the way clergy think about at what age they will retire, because that we need to have some signaling from the church about what the church wants to encourage. Do we want a lot of older clergy? Do we want older clergy to retire and make way for younger clergy? That's not for us to say. So that's what I was really saying. I do want to also just highlight what Frank said about the discipline with which we look at these questions, because number one, we are always looking at what is financially viable for the pension fund. So every single year, we hire outside actuaries and go through a very comprehensive look at what can the fund afford. And we do what we call Monte Carlo simulations, over 10,000 different runs of different possible market conditions, inflation paths, and that to say, with this amount of assets, are we comfortable that we can actually underwrite the promises that we've made? And we feel comfortable. We're in what we say cautious but comfortable, we don't have more assets than we need to know that we can weather the inevitable financial volatility into the future, but we feel good about what we're doing today. So anything that involves kind of a major tweak, we look at the financial implications first to make sure we're not jeopardizing the financial sustainability of the fund. Thank you.
Mary Kay, we have one last question.
One last question. Okay. And is it over here? We have dueling last questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Ingrid Cheeseborough. I am a lay deputy from the Diocese of Southeast Florida. And my question, I'm going to change gears a little bit, is what the CPG is doing to address the rising insurance premiums for property and casualty insurance for our churches located in coastal and other high-risk areas.
Oh, fabulous, and not at all complicated question. So I'm going to give that to Frank.
This is certainly a challenge and another one that is going to stay with us. I would say at first we handle all of our businesses the same way that Mary Kate just talked about the clergy pension plan. We look at each one of them. They have different risks, but we look at it for what are the assets we have. The assets are earmarked for property and casualty. They're earmarked for lay defined benefit. They're earmarked for clergy defined benefit, that sort of thing, to make sure that we have the right amount of assets to meet our short and long-term needs. And that's where property casualty is right now in terms of that balance. We want to be able, when we get it right, we almost want to break even in any given year, or maybe have a little return to capital. We want to collect as little as possible from all of our clients that make sure that we can pay claims. So, when the rain falls and the wind blows and other things happens, that we have that. And that's that balance of, we need to make sure that we can be around for that. And we have had to have material double-digit increases in property casualty the last 2 years. We've gotten to a point where we're feeling that we're in a similar, confident, cautious zone, but we just, we're into hurricane season now. So we just have to see how this year goes by. But we've gotten to a point where we feel that the assets are in that yellow zone is our comfort zone, comfort but cautious. And we're hopeful that we have stabilized some things, because that's our goal, is to stabilize and mitigate that volatility to our clients. But there's certain things we can't let our asset levels drop to such low level that if the markets change too, that we just can't recover from that. And that's what that balance is. So I can't promise that we won't see continue to see high increases, but we've stabilized them. Hopefully, the world cooperates with us. The weather cooperates with us, a little bit. And it's not just storms. It's wildfires. It's big hail. People, I don't have to tell you where we live. We see bigger hail every day that falls, and that's why we're here. We're experts in that. We just got to balance those things.
Well, again, another note of pride in Frank and his team at the church insurance companies, where many insurance companies are pulling out even of homeowners insurance. I'm hearing in places like Florida and other hurricane-prone places, we're managing to stay the course, and we think that that's so important. And the last thing I want to add there is this company has to be self-sustaining. We can't take monies from the pension fund, clergy pension fund, and plop it into the property and casualty business. So we have to run this as a self-sustained business. But as Frank mentioned, we're not running it like a for-profit business where we're looking to put additional monies in the coffer. We're looking to basically pay our claims and make sure that we have a respectable, reliable level of capital to weather those, difficult days. So thank you. I know that everybody has to get back to work. I'm so grateful for all of you joining us today. Sorry, one more question. I apologize.
I actually think there's two. There's one over there and one here.
Oh,
Can we
okay.
take those?
Can we take them? Okay.
Oh, you're gonna let me go? Hi, I'm Heather. I'm in Eau Claire. My question is sort of on the other end of the spectrum. There's an increasing number of parishes that are not offering coverage for children and families. And I'm wondering if anyone is doing studies on deployment and the results of that.
Patty, do you want to address that?
We are not doing any studies on that. We haven't identified that as a trend that we see happening. But the right people in the room, we will look into seeing whether we can see if there's any noticeable differences or any changes that we should be monitoring. So thank you.
Thank you.
Quickly, just to answer the friend from Southeast Florida, I believe it was, because I'm from North Carolina coastal area as well.
And one of the things that, as we all know, with the increase in the property insurance rates last year was because of COVID, and when you're looking at replacement costs and the coverage, we had greater replacement costs because of the building supplies being so much higher. And the other was where you all have had to buy reinsurance to make sure that you could cover. We've seen that in North Carolina. And to your point, we've had several companies pull out, like on the Outer Banks, that are no longer writing wind coverage. So it's something that we all have to work on, and everything like what we've had with COVID and so forth will affect these rates.
Thank you for those helpful comments. So again, no more questions? Good. Okay. Well, I really, really appreciate everybody coming today. We always look forward to these lunches, every general convention. And I want to thank our panelists who did a spectacular job. And I also want to say that we have almost 100 people who are participating by Zoom as well. So I want to thank you all for your attention and apologize that you didn't have that delicious salad and dessert I've been eyeing in front of you. So thank you. Enjoy General Convention. We look forward to visiting with all of you. Thank you.